Welcome to Ridgewood Talks. Through this podcast, we will be introducing you to some of the leaders and legends in our village. We'll keep you updated about fascinating local events. We'll dig into the town's hot topics and so much more. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeanne Johnson, the founder of Ridgewood Talks and Ridgewood Walks. The goal of these initiatives is to create a kinder, more connected, and more vibrant community. I'm thrilled to be hosting this podcast with my good friend and all-around wonderful guy, Jordan Kaufman. We look forward to meeting with you weekly and hearing your thoughts on who and what you'd like to learn about in our beautiful hometown. For now, be kind, do good, and enjoy this episode. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Jordan Kaufman, co-host of Ridgewood Talks. On this episode, we welcome Rob Wolcott, co-founder and chair of the World Innovation Network, known as Twin Global. A special thanks to our production partners at Ignite Creator Studios, located right here in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Contact Ignite Creator Studios for business content and strategy needs, including video podcasting and social media support. Our guest today, Rob Wolcott, is an adjunct professor at both the Kellogg School of Management and the Booth School of Business, focusing on innovation and executive education. He is an author of multiple books, including Proximity, his latest book, and he's an investor in over 30 companies and venture funds. Rob is leading the way in exploration of AI, digital technologies, and the future landscape of business, society, and everyday life. Rob, thanks so much for being here today.
Great to be here, Jordan, and great to be here in Ridgewood.
Well, you haven't always been from Ridgewood. I know you hail from Chicago, and you came here in middle of COVID, really.
In the midst of COVID, yeah. So wasn't that the normal move for everybody? I want out. I'm moving to New Jersey. I mean, so I remember when my wife Ada and our daughters Jolie and Sage first got here, and we went to like some newcomers things, and people said, "Well, where are you from?" And everybody was from Manhattan or Brooklyn or. And we said Chicago, and they said, "Oh, you really moved." Yeah, it's been absolutely great. I lived my entire life in the Chicago area. Love Chicago. I obviously go back there to teach with Kellogg and Booth, which is Northwestern and University of Chicago. But COVID hit, and I was at home all the time, like all of us. And I said to my wife, every time I go downtown Chicago, I pass my freshman dormitory. I need a change. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Okay, where do you want to move?" And I said, "I don't know." And we could talk more about it if you want. We looked all over the country, and we landed on Ridgewood, and I can't tell you how happy we all four are about that. And our dog, too, Cece.
So when landing on Ridgewood, did you just take the globe, kind of spin it, and put your finger on a point, or?
No, we were being a professor, and my wife, Ada, has a finance and asset management background. So we had a spreadsheet, and we had a process. We had 6 target locations. But this was all during COVID, so we were going online. These were all places we had been, but we were looking online. We had a couple of agents with the iPad walking around houses in Boulder, Colorado. So we looked at Bozeman, Boulder, Denver, Austin, and the New York area. Mm-hmm. We landed on the New York area, and then we decided to focus on northern New Jersey because my mother-in-law lives in Edgewater. Ada grew up in Randolph. She was born in Hong Kong, but grew up in Randolph. And I have family in Manhattan, and so we said let's stay here because it's also close to both LaGuardia and Newark, and I travel a lot for business, a lot overseas, and so having those nonstop flights from Newark and occasionally, if I have to, JFK, was a huge advantage. So what took us to Ridgewood, honestly, was we found an agent in Montclair. That's sort of where we started because we knew about Montclair, and we said, look, we want a real town, great schools, with sidewalks, because I'm sure that many of your listeners know there are what I refer to in Bergen County and northern New Jersey as a bunch of fake towns. Not to offend anybody, I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean you've got a mailing address, but there's no town. Mm-hmm. And so I said I want to be able to walk to the coffee shop every morning with my dog, and so we looked at 5 or 6 towns in this area. And the very first house we looked at and the very last house we looked at 2 days in a row was the one we made an offer on. And it's been the best decision for our family.
Yeah, and you do walk to town with
Yeah.
your CC on a regular basis.
Every day I'm home. In fact, this was a life hack for me that I only realized like last year. It was a horribly cold day, and I'm from Chicago, so horribly cold means horribly cold. And even here it was like 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And I thought, am I going to walk Cece to the coffee shop today? Because that's the highlight of her whole day. She gets a puppuccino, and she gets a beef jerky treat from her friend Steve. And I thought, you know what? This is my commitment. This makes my life better. It makes my dog's life better. And I suited up, and I put her on the leash, and we walked to the coffee shop in the middle of that day. So any day I'm home, unless I cannot schedule it, I take the walk from Brookside Avenue to Ridgewood Coffee, and there's a great group of people that hangs out there. You know most of them, and they're always there. There's always somebody there. You can have a conversation about what's going on, what the best restaurants are, who not to talk to, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'll give it away. It's Ridgewood Coffee is
Yeah.
the coffee shop you go to. How do you like the new location in the old Hillman building?
Oh my gosh! Well, when I moved in, it was the old location,
Right.
which was good enough, just past the square. But there wasn't that much space inside to sit. There wasn't that much space outside to hang out. And so I thought, well, this is good. I tried a bunch of places, and they had the best coffee, had the best feel. And then we're here for about a year, and they announced they're moving to the Lamp store, which of course they were, because it was a block closer to my house. So what's there not to like?
So it worked in your favor, but I have some friends who take the train who love Ridgewood Coffee, and they're like, it's one block further away.
They don't want to cross the street. Look, I would just say cross the street. And the other thing is Terry, the owner, he is all in on coffee. Having an industrial engineering background, and I'm into technology and business and product. It's great to have a coffee shop. He actually has a grinding and roasting production line. So we have industry in Ridgewood now, right downtown, and that's pretty exciting.
Well, that's something we're definitely talking about on the show today, is about industry and business in Ridgewood. And let's plug the book. I mean, you wrote this book, Proximity, and you've got a lot of incredible ideas about how proximity relates to community and relates to how people are doing things. So as you were choosing these locations, as you're thinking about this, and I know proximity you only wrote in the last year, but it's something you've always been thinking about. I can see the
Yeah, it started in
process.
2014. I started working on the concept and then started doing the research and applying it to investing class, et cetera, in 2014.
Yeah, so and we'll talk about how it relates to business, but when you were thinking about the community and making that move during COVID, which in the book Proximity, you talk a lot about COVID and how that, started an adoption cycle for a lot of the technologies which we use today. What was it about Ridgewood and that line of thinking that you had that was different from some of the other places? I know you mentioned the coffee shop and that proximity of the places you want to go, but also...
Well, to be honest, Jordan, the notion of proximity in terms of my investing and my research and my teaching didn't relate to our choice for Ridgewood.
Mm-hmm.
But philosophically, emotionally, ethically, I guess it did, because I don't like driving. I don't like commuting. I work from home when I'm home, and I have no problem going to the airport and flying 8 hours to go wherever for work. But so for me, as a day-to-day, as a sort of matter of day-to-day, proximity means being able to walk to stuff I really want to do on a daily basis, like right downtown Ridgewood. So that was a fundamental component of our choice. But it wasn't related to the notion of proximity and technology and all that. Though I will say, when you mentioned that COVID accelerated our transition to proximity, I remember at the beginning of COVID, we all remember going in front of the screens. And I was explaining this concept of proximity to a colleague of mine in London. And he said, well, wait a minute. Here we are on screens. We're having this meeting. This isn't proximity at all. You're thousands of miles away. And I said, actually, it's the opposite. That's precisely proximity, because we get to connect on a deeper basis. Not the same as being together in person, though that will happen later this century. But we get to connect on a much deeper basis than a phone call or an email, anywhere, anytime. And so this is the punchline of proximity: anything, anywhere, anytime. And this is where we're going across every industry for the rest of our careers. And I can maybe back up and explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to get into that. Let's talk a second though about with Ridgewood and the choice to Ridgewood.
Sure.
Your kids are in school.
Yeah.
And the experience that they're having, and you live very close to the high school too, so there's not a big commute there.
Well, not only very close, we live across the street, truth be told. So I tell people that my daughters are going to a boarding school, and they say, "Well, you've got such a great high school across the street," and I say, "That's right."
Yeah. And how have the kids enjoyed moving to Ridgewood and the new experience there?
It's been fantastic. Obviously, one of our criteria was great schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ridgewood hit that list. So we already knew that. And then, of course, I emotionally, philosophically, history is my favorite subject. And so there's something about seeing that high school and having a great sense of jealousy for my daughters because they get to go to Hogwarts. I mean, and it really is a great place. But the other thing about Ridgewood that's interesting, number one, I don't know what universe has gifted us with this, but Jolie and Sage both have fantastic friends. We love their friends. We love their friends' parents, and that's really important. But one of the things I see coming from Evanston, Illinois, which is a town just north of Chicago on Lake Michigan, it's very nice. It's where Northwestern University is. I've spent a lot of my life there. That's a college town, and I like that about Evanston. What I realized after living here for a year or so, I said to my wife, Ada, we live in a high school town, and it really is, and it's different. One of the ways it's different, and one of the things we're so thankful about this town is if Jolie or Sage want to walk into town with their friends, we say, okay, have fun. We're not worried about anything, really. Maybe we should be, I don't know. But you see groups of junior high school, middle school kids walking around. You see the high schoolers. They're just part of the community with everybody else. And there's a freedom in this space. There's an authenticity in this space. So I tell people who aren't from here, it's like living in the 50s in a good way. Mm-hmm. And I value that very much.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I've never heard it worded like that this is a high school town.
It's absolutely a high school. People go to the football games even if their kid's not at the high school, which is blows me away.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, I grew up here, and I went to the high school, and everyone in this town has it's a commuter town in some ways. Yeah. And that's, I think, how some people might say it. But I think you're right that it's more of a high school town because everyone who's here, whether they commute or not, everyone is serious about their kids' education. There aren't many people who move to Ridgewood, live in Ridgewood, who are not focused on their kids' success, their kids' future, and the path that they're taking. And that also, like you said, you like your kids' friends, you like their parents. These are all people who have this same kind of dedication, and they're all serious about where they're going. There's not a lot of people who are slacking to a degree. You don't have a high failure rate at Ridgewood, so it's pretty impressive.
Well, I want to add a layer to that though, because I would have 100% agreed when we moved in, Ada and I said. So one thing we noticed, I don't know if your listeners have noticed this, but the taxes are fairly high here. Mm-hmm. Stuff works. Schools work, town works. At Ridgewood Coffee, I get to know one of the guys who does street maintenance, Victor. Hi, Victor. Stuff works. But like a lot of people, we thought, we're going to move here, we're going to love it. Jolie and Sage are going to go off to college. Maybe we'll stay while they're in college, and then we'll maybe think about moving. Mm-hmm. But what I found is we've loved the town so much, we've loved Brookside so much, and I have to credit Michael and Laura D'Angelo who live on our street. We've gotten to know them very well. And Michael always says to me, Rob, what do you mean you're going to move? His girls are finished with college. They're living in Manhattan. What do you mean? Where are you going to move? Mm-hmm. This is the best place. This is the best street. And at first I was like, yeah, okay. Every time I go down to City Hall to pay my taxes, I'll think about that. But now I realize he's right. We might just stay here after the kids go off to college and build their lives. This is a great place to be.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people say that, and I know when I was graduating high school, everyone's parents were going to move the minute we all, went to college and were off, and almost none of them did.
And then they find utter disappointment when they go looking at other places.
Well, they all live in the Dayton now if they downsized or something like that. So there's it's interesting how people kind of find the flypaper or something as they walk through Ridgewood and they get stuck. So I feel like that's true. One of the things that I think that's interesting is you have your daughters going through school, almost heading off, or at least in the process of thinking through the college experience. You're a PhD holder, you're a professor, and you think a lot about the future and where business and society is going. How do you juggle that and also trying to be a non-micromanaging parent?
Well, you could check with Jolie and Sage, but I don't think they would say I'm micromanaging at all. Ada, my wife, is very engaged, but she's not really micromanaging either. So Jolie is way into volleyball, and it's great when you see your kids really excited about something and committed to it and ready to put in the time and the effort. And Ada's right there alongside her. I'm surprised that she hasn't actually run out onto the field and started playing at some point, because she's way into it. But we try really hard to say, find what you're excited about, find what you're committed to, and do it the best you can. Sage, for some reason, it's wonderful, is way into Latin. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's, I don't know, something about my genetics being interested in history, but she's way into Latin and piano, and so that's what she's focused on. But the world is changing really fast. I know all of us, me included, are concerned about where my daughter's going to go, what sort of careers are they going to build. And I have some fairly specific perspectives about that you never know until you look back, you connect the dots in retrospect, as Steve Jobs said. But I'm pretty sure is the right approach. And the punchline of that is find things that you're really interested in. I'm not going to use the word passion. I think that that misleads people sometimes. We can talk more about that.
It's become a trigger term in the industry and community. Of
and also people say passion. Well, I don't know. What am I like reality TV. I mean, what do you mean? Soccer? What are you talking about? But find. Let's take a specific example. Your kid's going off to college. And I've had this question many times from parents because they discover at a cocktail party that I'm a professor of business and blah, blah, blah. And so maybe they know my PhD's in engineering. So they're looking for a really applied answer. And their question is, what should my kids study in college? Great question. And I horribly disappoint them because I say, well, your child should choose whatever he or she loves the most, whatever actual subject they love the most, and do the best they can at it. And then after they sort of deflate and they say, well, my daughter loves art history. What's she going to do with that? I say, well, then she should study art history and do the best she can at it. But I make them feel a little bit better. They should also take one class, Intro to Statistics, one class, Intro to Accounting, and one class about how computer systems work. It doesn't have to be coding, but something about how computer systems work. Otherwise, study theater, study industrial engineering, anything you want, do the best you can at it, but study a little stats and study a little accounting. And the reason is stats and accounting are languages. You cannot read a cash flow statement unless you know what you're looking at. In fact, Jordan, I'm sure that I met a few sort of mid-career executives in my life who I was suspicious. I'm not sure that he knows how to read a cash flow statement. And even with artificial intelligence, generative AI, all these things, you need to know when someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. You need to be able to figure out why your business unit isn't doing so well. Or have a conversation with your wealth manager or your tax accountant. So study and do the best you can at whatever you're excited about, and then take those little annoying language classes. And occasionally somebody finds out they love statistics and they become a statistician.
Guilty. So that's interesting, and I agree with that wholeheartedly because too often people envision their kids kind of living this suit and tie,
Yes.
walking down the corporate halls with all their peers laughing, with that, that success laugh, that ho ho ho.
They're thinking of that montage from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Remember where Kramer kept going to work, but he didn't have a job there?
Yeah.
They're thinking of that montage. But you're right, and the career job landscape is changing dramatically and very fast.
Yeah, and I can say from experience with people I work with, and some of them are, kind of like, I had no idea my kid would be successful because I always kind of looked at what they were doing and like, that's got no use. And like, meanwhile, it's like,
video games?
Turns out,
who's going to make money in video games?
Yeah, exactly. And turns out that stuff actually, the world is not standing still.
Yeah.
And too often, I think we look at what worked in the past. When people ask me career advice or anything else, and I'll give them something that doesn't sound like what their grandfather and father has told them the whole time, and it's like, well, the world's changing. So if you're using 20-year-old advice, that's like going on a 20-year-old computer and expecting to get the same.
Well, there's still a lot of value to traditional wisdom. The challenge for each of us is to translate it. I'll give you an example. Everybody talks about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, or STEAM. They throw art in there, and I'm a fan of that. And I'm a fan of STEM fields, but note that the hard skills are the easiest to automate. Think about that. So we're all, learn your math, and you do need to learn the concept of math and how it works and what you can do with it and all that. There are lots of reasons why that will continue to be relevant. But as a practical matter, the mechanics of the hard skills are the easiest to automate. Now, what I'm not saying, Jordan, is you can't automate the soft skills. That's coming. That's already underway. We can talk more about that if you want. But that's the space that will take longer and be more complicated in terms of how it's automated. And even after it is entirely automated and you've got your robot, an android walking around your house taking care of your kid, whatever, we'll still need those soft skills to live good lives. We'll still need to understand how to interact with each other, how to build community, how to build a sense of meaning and belonging. And so those are things we learn at college. You don't have to go to college to learn those, but that's one of the things that happens if you go to a good collegiate environment. You're socializing yourself to figure out how to be in community with others and how to envision and build better lives.
One of the things, I might be alone on this, but if I spend too much time with technology, if I feel like I get a little bit too immersed in technology, I'm on too many screens or anything like that, the way I normally try to cure it is I go outside. I do something very non-technology oriented. I almost like shift all the way to the other side. And I find Ridgewood with its, if you go to like the city or something, there's a lot of flashing screens and it feels, there's a futuristic feel to some parts.
Right.
I almost like being in more historic areas when I'm trying to get away from it and I want to be somewhere that's a little bit more populated. Do you think that feeds into kind of the appeal where people have started to go more to the quote-unquote outdoor mall towns as opposed to indoor malls where it feels a little bit more, technology-oriented? Do you think there's anything to that, or am I just fishing in the wrong stream?
Absolutely. Fishing is an extraordinary complement to surfing, so to speak. There's actually a lot of science behind this in terms of our well-being, our mental well-being, our contentedness, our happiness, in terms of connection with nature. And it sounds trite, but it's not trite. If you think about the fact that human beings evolved over billions of years to where we are today, and in almost the entirety of that context, we were immersed in natural environments. And only in the vanishingly small space of the past 10,000 years have we been in anything but. So it makes sense that we might lose that connection, but when you figure out how to reconnect with it or stay connected with it, it makes an enormous difference. In fact, some of the people that are the most deliberate about disconnecting or about going on silent retreats at a Buddhist monastery or a Catholic convent or something, some of my friends who are most deliberate about that sort of activity are technology leaders and investors. In fact, I remember when Ada and I were pregnant with Jolie, and I was intentionally looking at my friends in Silicon Valley and other places relevant. And I found that they were much more likely to restrict screen time from their kids than my friends in other environments, much more likely.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Ada and I decided to do was, certainly they could watch a DVD. You remember those DVDs? They could watch a DVD with us, or we could throw something on Netflix on. But we didn't allow them to use iPads on their own until I think we decided 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't get their own iPhone until I think they were 12.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they were 12. And in both cases, coincidentally, they were the second to last kid in their class that got an iPhone.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they didn't say, well, everyone else has one. They tried that a couple times and it didn't work, and so they stopped.
Mm-hmm.
But we explained to them why we don't want so early for you to be tethered to this piece of technology. That'll happen soon enough. We're dependent on it, but the ability to break away and find meaningful engagement for a few hours or a few days is a skill. We have to pick that back up. And I tell you that my friends who do that, they live much better lives. I was just in Santa Fe, New Mexico, this past weekend for a whole long weekend retreat about where do you want to go, the rest of your career, that sort of thing. One of the companies I invested in hosts these things. And we didn't require people to not have their phones on, but I noticed during the sessions, almost nobody pulled their phone out at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you're present. That's when that people they're focusing their attention on where we are right now and connecting with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I heard a talk where someone was talking about people who put their phone on the table, and
Mm-hmm.
they like put it in between, and it's almost like a protector, similar to how if you're texting with someone or talking, the phone is the mediation between
Yeah,
them.
it's interesting. Well, here's an easy hack that our family's used since the beginning. None of Ada and myself, none of the four of us are allowed to use a mobile phone during a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's a really important, maybe it's a logistical thing or something really critical, and we all agree, okay, Mom, pull out the phone, let's look it up. And that's exceedingly rare. We all know it, we all respect it. I put my phone off to the side, and we have dinner, and there are no phones at all.
There are even some restaurants now that are doing that, where put your phone in a locker and then go to the table.
That's nice. I mean, I tend to be a little more libertarian, so if somebody else, who knows, they could be right. Mm-hmm. If somebody else wants to be staring at their phone all the time, that's their journey. I don't want to get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
We just know this works for us.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, and we're on the same page. I know, a lot of parents are starting to recognize some of the mental health impacts of screen time, early screen time, as children's brains are developing, and knowing that we don't really develop our brains until 25. But good luck telling your kid they can't get a phone until they're 25. That's not not going to work out.
Well, I did tell my daughters they're not allowed to date until they're 30. But we'll see how that goes.
We'll check in. We'll check in 15 years. See how that worked out, Rob. Let me ask you one last question about Ridgewood, and then let's jump a little bit into technology innovation and obviously the book Proximity.
Yeah.
Magic wand. You said Hogwarts, so magic wand. You can wave it over Ridgewood, knowing what you know, knowing some of the companies you're investing in, having a little bit of a precursor to what the next 5 and 10 years is.
Yeah.
How would you change Ridgewood to be better suited for where you see the future going?
I believe that Ridgewood's opportunity is to become more of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I mean by that? So technology is pervading our lives. Technology also has had this interesting dynamic where, are we still a commuter town? Of course. But how many of you know Ridgewood residents who are commuting 5 days a week every day into the office in Manhattan? There still are some, but many fewer than 2019. Mm-hmm. And so this means that we have more and more people who have the opportunity, and thanks be to God, it is an opportunity, but the opportunity to live more of their day here in the city and still be productive and still connect with work. There are lots of challenges to that. We could talk about that another time. But what that says to me is people are increasingly going to be looking for places that aren't just an address close to the train, though it's nice to have that. they're going to be looking for places where if I'm going to be spending a lot of my daytime hours and evening hours around here, where do I want to live? And this is one of the reasons people are attracted to Ridgewood. It's a place where you actually have a town square and a World War I memorial. And yes, I've read all of the, that guy who founded the area. You can't really quite read his bio. Anyway, there's something meaningful and authentic about that, that we're actually going to have, because more people have the opportunity to be where they want to be physically, but still have proximity to New York and employers in New Jersey and that sort of thing. I think if Ridgewood doubles down on experiences, if Ridgewood doubles down on the pleasure of spending time with people in the town, of walking through, of dining on the, on the, when it's a nice evening, dining outside,
the
for
corrals.
instance. Yeah, those were great.
Mm-hmm.
If Ridgewood gets its act in gear and turns that amazing Art Deco movie theater into something,
mm-hmm.
and brings people here, I'll just give an example: the Parlance, the concerts at the Presbyterian Church. I'm a huge fan of classical music and kind of a classical music snob. They do a great job.
Oh, yeah.
They get acts here, and I use the term acts in a professional way. They get acts here that are really quite significant. And
he has tier 1 professionals.
Extraordinary. And I've been blessed to take Sage, my youngest daughter, who's magically in love with classical music as well. She's come with me to these performances. And I sit there thinking, this is totally unfair. So what a spoiled brat. I didn't have the opportunity to do this when I was in high school. But, bringing that sort of quality and experience here to Ridgewood, concurrent with a time when technology allows us to physically be where we want to be and not have to be, that's the opportunity for Ridgewood.
Well said. And it will be exciting to see how that movie project, the movie theater, what ends up happening there. I've heard a lot of exciting things, and we'll see.
You never know until it's over. All this stuff is very complicated, but it's exciting to know that people are working hard to try and figure it out.
Yeah, and I mean that's the tough thing is there's a lot of opportunity. A lot of people have opinions, and of course, it's how do you prioritize and how do you juggle where those opportunities actually are going to succeed.
Yeah.
So let's jump into some of the innovation, some of the things that you're seeing, and obviously your book Proximity. What do you think is obviously artificial intelligence right now is probably the thing that's on most people's minds, and I think investors' minds and things like that. What do you think that people get wrong about artificial intelligence?
Oh boy, how long do we have? So I'll start.
20 seconds.
Computers will never be creative or empathetic. That's what they get wrong. Everybody got it wrong almost everybody got it wrong. In 2017, I think, I posted an article in Forbes, and I entitled it, What Will Remain Uniquely Human in an Age of AI? Nothing. Now, there's a metaphysical, philosophical discussion I'd be happy to have that gives a nuance to this. But in terms of, as a practical matter, the cuddly teddy bears that humans had for so long with respect to AI, and people say, well, computers will never be creative. Well, how does that feel now? I mean, beauty is as beauty does, right? So that generative AI is creating video, creating from whole cloth, creating poetry. Is it William Shakespeare? No, not yet, but neither are we. So it is being, as a dictionary version of the term, creative. Can it be better? Can it be more? Yes, that's where we come in. But nonetheless, I think we've dashed that ridiculous notion. The one that people still today continue to hold on to is computers will never be empathetic. They'll never feel empathy. Well, perhaps, but I'll point out the opposite. Automation, computational systems will actually be able to leverage empathy better than you and I can. What do I mean by this? Well, an AI system increasingly will be able to analyze your words, typing, writing, speaking, whatever, the movements of your face. We analyze your tells for Jordan Kaufman and be able to manipulate you for good or for bad, with your consent or not, better than another human being can. And by the way, they're going to be doing it differently with me because it'll get to know how my face moves when I'm speaking. So they will be able, automated systems will be able to empathize as a practical matter, as an instrumental matter in order to achieve things, whatever those things are, good or bad. So that's both an opportunity and a threat. So as a practical matter, they are being empathetic. Now I've had these philosophical arguments with colleagues and my friends in technology and all this, and usually they agree, but sometimes they say, well, yeah, but that computer isn't actually feeling empathy.
Right.
And I say, well, you could be right, probably are, but now you're asking a metaphysical question. And an interesting irony, Jordan, is that many of the people who throw up that challenge are avowed atheists. And so here I'm talking to it's very ironic.
Yeah.
Here I'm talking to an atheist who says, yeah, but that computer's not actually feeling empathy. Oh, well, that's a metaphysical question. You want to talk about metaphysics?
Yeah.
So as a practical matter, computers will be creative. They are already. They're going to be increasingly empathetic in terms of the way they interact with the world. And so we have to face it and assume that automation will continue to get closer and closer to us. But I'll end this little diatribe with the other thing that people get wrong is it's all about imitating humans. This is where we start. Let's imitate humans with AI. But AI allows not only the autonomous systems to be different than humans, better in some ways, not in others, to be different and to be new kinds of entities, but also, Jordan, it allows us to be different and better. I like to think of artificial intelligence as a mirror that you hold up to yourself, and it asks, what kind of human do you want to become? That's the challenge and the opportunity it poses to us.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that I've found is some people see it as a incredible enhancer or opportunity to amplify, if you will.
Yes.
Other people view it as an incredible threat.
We're becoming dumber. You've seen this research.
Well, yeah, that research came out. What are your thoughts on that, by the way? Because MIT did it, that one study that I think has been very popularized, and I don't doubt their scientific processes. But I always do wonder when we measure from what was and then what is now with a big change in between, sometimes you also got to change where you measure and what you measure with, and whether or not we need some of those skills or we don't. I don't remember phone numbers anymore because my phone remembers all my phone numbers. But when I was a kid, I used to remember all my friends' phone numbers.
Right.
But I don't need to take up the real estate in my head with that anymore, and that's a benefit.
You make an excellent point. I mean, how many of us could really go out and grow our own food? If some of us can, we have gardens, but how many of us could really do that now? We rely on the overall ecosystem that humanity has built in order to supply so many of our needs. But in terms of the way I like to think about it, and I learned this from David Krakauer, who runs the Santa Fe Institute. He's an evolutionary geneticist, one of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet. And he has, by the way, this beautiful English accent that he uses to great effect, very condescendingly to great effect. But what he explained to me is you can categorize technologies and how they affect us cognitively. There are cognitively complementary technologies, and there are cognitively competitive technologies. And so a cognitively competitive technology that is not necessarily a bad thing is the GPS in your car or Google Maps on your phone. This, many of us have come to rely on. And by the way, being new to Debunking County, thank God for GPS.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you guys got around this region. You say, turn here. Which here? There are like 3 exits, the same place. And by the way, when I get off that 17, we don't have this in the Midwest, where you're going like 60 miles an hour, 17, and then you exit, you're like, Chipotle, bang, it's right there. We don't do that in the Midwest. We have a nice, relaxed exit, and you go around a thing, and you're at a light, and then you turn, and then you're in Chipotle. Here you're like, bang, Chipotle. All right, so thank God for GPS. But it's cognitively competitive in the sense that part of your brain starts to atrophy. It relies on it. So I don't know about you, but when I do drive, and I know Ada does this too, even if we're going someplace we've been 20 times, we still push the button and watch the screen. It tells us, is there traffic and all this, but really it's kind of something we become dependent on. A cognitively complementary technology would be, for instance, Roblox. A lot of your kids probably use Roblox, maybe some adults too. It's a really compelling platform, and it's cognitively complementary in the sense that it's enabling kids to create and do things and interact with people in these increasingly complicated environments where they can create and build. And so when I see a technology, I'm always wondering to what extent it's competitive. Is that good or bad? I like my GPS. Or is it complementary, and/or is it complementary, and it actually allows me to do more, and it engages a different part of my brain?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
1,000%. And I got a slightly funny story for you on the heels of that. So a Chinese food restaurant that used to be next to the movie theater, Hunan Villa, which, by the way, was the best Chinese in town when it was open.
I'm sorry it's not. My wife is Chinese. We're sorry it's not there anymore.
It was great. The owner, Henry, we'd go there very often, so he knew my family, and I ended up delivering Chinese food for him.
Oh, really?
When I got my license. And we didn't have GPS back then. So you asked the question, I don't know how you got around. Oh, I would have like 4 to 6 bags of Chinese food that would need to be delivered. And he had maps in the back of Ridgewood, Glen Rock, like all the towns you delivered to were basically based on what maps do I have sitting in my back kitchen for delivery people.
Yeah.
And I'd have to route where I'd go. Okay, I'm going to go here first, and then I'm going to go here, and I got to drive over here, and I could drop this one off while I do this.
Yeah. In operations research, we call that the traveling salesman problem. So you're looking at the different drop-offs and what's the most efficient route to get there. Guess what? That is uber easy for artificial intelligence to optimize.
Yep.
And bang, not only will it tell you where to go, it'll add you up with all the other delivery drivers and all the other calls coming in and adjust real time. We couldn't do that before. There was no way to do that.
Yeah, no, because the drivers also were disconnected, and we didn't really have cell phones back then, so there was no way for us to talk. So the opportunity set to create efficiency there obviously is very high.
Enormous.
But I can tell you, it was a good math problem, and there'd be a lot of drivers who couldn't really figure out what the efficient process was. So you kind of had one guy to be like, all right, you go here, no, take these bags, and there's always one person.
So you were the dispatch guy.
I don't know what I was. I was a 17-year-old who was trying to make a couple bucks on a Friday night. But it was just kind of funny because I think the same thing with GPS. There are times where I know exactly how to get there, and it's a very easy crutch, and you'll make the excuse of, I wonder what traffic is. So I go out of my way to try to take weird ways on my way home from work sometimes just to jog that. Actually,
that sort of thing to change up your routine occasionally is shown to be good from a cognitive perspective for the health, the long-term health of your cognitive system. Having some regularity is very good for your well-being, but also mixing it up from time to time is very good for especially your cognitive function. But Jordan, all this happens within this context of technology change, and it's happening so fast. And I hear people say things like, "Wow, stuff's changing so fast. Who can know where it's going? I'll just sort of execute in the meantime and hope I'm going in the right direction." That's sloppy. We have a responsibility as parents, as investors, as leaders in business, government, anything. We have a responsibility to try and generate better foresight as to where the world is going to go. What can we be confident will happen? What might happen? What's unlikely? And that was what led me originally to start the process that became Proximity, the book that came out last summer from Columbia University Press. And I remember exactly the time it started. It was 2014. I was at a technology event, and all the speakers kind of started to sound the same. And I thought, I've just started to do venture investing. And in your work in asset and wealth management, you know that venture investing is its own sort of animal.
Yeah.
And you're putting money in that you might never see again, literally never see again.
High probability.
High probability. So you've got to have a portfolio of optionality, and also you're committing your money for multiple years, maybe 10, if you're in a venture fund, 10, maybe up to 13 years. And so I said, we need better foresight. And so the question I asked was, I remembered from my economics training years ago, there's something in economics called general purpose technology, GPT. Now, that it's a coincidence, generative pre-trained transformer, set that aside, but it turns out GPT is a GPT to add to the complexity. Anyway, so if you can see the difference between the rising general purpose technology compared to the prior GPT, you can actually start to predict the future. And I do mean predict. So the classic GPT in economics is the steam engine. The steam engine was applicable across the entire economy. And then later along came the electric dynamo. The electric dynamo allows you to do things steam engines could never do. It has certain requirements, too, that are different than steam engines. So when you could see the fundamental difference, you could actually start to predict the future. And so in 2014, I asked the question, what is fundamentally different about all things digital? So certainly that's mobile apps and AI, but it could also be 3D printing. It could be rooftop solar power generation, anything small modular reactors, anything digitally enabled. What is fundamentally different between digital and the industrial age? And what you quickly recognize is digital technologies allow us to compress all sorts of capabilities into smaller and smaller packages and distribute them all over the economy, ever closer to each moment in time and space. And therefore, and this is proximity theory, it is a theory, proximity refers to the fact that digital compels value creation ever closer to the moment of demand in time and space. Now, what we're not, my co-author Kai-Han Krippendorf and I, what we're not saying is respond faster to customers. That's great. We've always wanted to do that. That's not what we're saying. We're literally saying that digital technologies compel, push, force the production and provision of value, products, services, and experiences ever closer to the moment where someone might demand it. If you think about Uber, that's a great example. I need a ride, and I can see where the car is, and it shows up. You know, we didn't have that 15 years ago.
That sometimes gives me anxiety, though, because
Why
I
is
watch
that?
the Uber driver sitting there at the stoplight, and I'm like, why isn't he moving?
Why isn't he moving? Yeah. Well, there are a whole bunch of stories about we all have. But that's an example, an early example of driving proximity. But, I mean, we could go through any range of industry. Proximity is active in every context. It just looks different. So in the book, we have a chapter, how we work, how we eat, how we create and produce, how we prevent and cure, how we power, and how we defend. And in the last chapter, we focus on virtual reality and space, because those are the two horizons of the 21st century. Humanity has never been there before, and we are definitely going this century. And both VR and space are 100% proximate environments, which we could talk about if you want.
One of the things that you mentioned there about being able to deliver on demand, if you will, or when the moment of demand happens,
Right.
and delivering. And, you know, the first thing that pops in my head when you say that is the ability to watch, you know, like trivia night at a bar, right? Someone asks a question, I can get the answer immediately.
Right, that's cheating.
True.
That's cheating.
Okay.
Okay.
We won't go into that.
Okay, all right.
I also think about being able to watch media you want to consume immediately.
Yes.
And then probably the most consumerism one is the Amazon one-click buy, right?
Yes.
You say, oh, you should go buy this book, Proximity. I mean, literally, when you told me you bought a book, you wrote a book, I one-click bought it as I was.
Oh, well, thank you. And as you might know, I brought you a copy, and it's signed for you. So you please take that other copy and give it to somebody else.
Will do.
Right.
But I think one of the things that's been very challenging in our DoorDash age and everything else for some of the downtown businesses is how do they keep up with these other companies which can, make these things reality, right? Most retailers can't do what Amazon can do,
Yes.
don't have the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Do they go out and leverage some other source? Is there an opportunity for businesses to come in and help these small mom and pop retailers have some method of taking their proximity to this potential customer base
Right.
here and transmitting that into value for both the citizens as well as the businesses themselves?
Yeah, so no doubt these are very difficult transitions. But I'm going to answer your question a little bit obliquely, but it was an interview that I conducted a couple years ago. A fascinating leader of retail. And again, it's not a local store in Ridgewood, but one of the icons of global retail is a woman named Ann Pitcher. Ann was, when I met her, the CEO of Selfridges in London, which is an extraordinary retail institution. It's sort of like Harrods, but I would think even a little better. No offense to Harrods. But Ann never went to college. She got an internship at Harrods at the age of 16 and worked her way up from the basement to become CEO of Selfridges. And I had the opportunity to do a long-form video interview with her because I met her at a future visioning program that Selfridges hosted, and I went and spoke and talked about proximity, and we started talking, and I said, I would love to interview you as you retire from Selfridges and move on. So she's since retired. And the company said, wow, that's great. So one thing really stood out to me from that interview. I said, Ann, how do you navigate radical change in consumer and society and much less retail? And she said, our job is to make retail essential in people's lives. Our job is to make retail essential in people's lives. Now, she meant that literally. I said, what do you mean by essential? She said, look it up in the dictionary. Our job, we don't always achieve it, but our job is to figure out how do we make our experience of retail, and at Selfridges, she means the physical space, she means the online, she means the engagement, the events, the experiences, so important to our consumers that they make the time to be there. They make the time to connect. And that's really hard because there are a lot of things vying for their time. But as I project that challenge down to where we are in Ridgewood, how do I make Ridgewood essential in people's lives? I'll tell you, for my family and me, it already is. And it's incredibly important to me to be able to have direct access to walk to things, to be part of the community. And I imagine there's a good chunk of the Ridgewood area that feels the same way. There's some people who couldn't care less, but let's not worry about them. But the people who do want that sort of connection and engagement and opportunity, if there's a new thing in Ridgewood popping up, Ada and I are probably going to go by and check it out. And then the challenge to that retailer is to figure out how to get us to come back a second time. And I'm a willing victim. So I think all of us, and this can be translated into any business context, but all of us should take Ann's challenge. How do we make our business essential in people's lives? Not just a nice to have, because that goes away.
I think that is an awesome question imposed, and I think that everyone in the town, if there's something that's important to you, that's a great way to think about it. How do I make this thing essential? And if it's education or if it's a philanthropy or something like that in the town, how do you make yourself more and more essential?
Yeah.
The more you do that, the more success and the more important you'll be.
By the way, mom and pop businesses, family businesses have an advantage in that respect because around here, families talk about families. And to give a quick example, Ada and I took our good friends, Sage's one of her best friends, Valentina's parents, out to dinner last night, and we went to La Lanterna. And I eat all over the world. That place is fantastic. But many of you might know the story that the couple that owned it and managed it with love for so long tried to retire, and I got all messed up. I don't have anything to say about that. It got totally destroyed. They came back. And people talk about that. I'll go out of my way to go to La Lanterna, one, because the food is great, but also because there's that meaning that is there. And you don't get that meaning from Amazon.
That's very true. That's very true. And I think that's part of what makes Ridgewood special.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we could do this probably all day. And already everyone's signed out of our podcast due to time. So this was awesome, though. I really appreciate you coming by and talking about the book and talking about your experience and talking about a lot of interesting things that hopefully are thought-provoking for the listeners to think about what this means for either their children's, their business, or their relationship with the town.
Great.
And how that relates.
I'd like to add a quick coda. First of all, if anybody wants to connect, I'm always on LinkedIn, Robert C. Wolcott. Let me know we met on Ridgewood Talks because, of course, we didn't. But I'm happy to connect, happy to have a coffee at Ridgewood Coffee. And lastly, thanks to you and to Ignite for having this podcast. This is the sort of thing that can make Ridgewood essential in people's lives.
I love that. I love that. You stole a little bit of my thunder on the outro. But
oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
Well, everyone, thank you guys for joining us today. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Please subscribe to the podcast on all major platforms. And if you want to see this in video, if you're listening to it, you can go to YouTube and Spotify. I want to give a big thanks to Ignite Creator Studios, to Gil and Joe. Thank you guys so much. And if any of you guys have video podcasting, content strategy, or any kind of marketing services which you want to discuss with them, I highly encourage you. They're great guys. They're located in Ridgewood, right above Talbot's. I'm Jordan Kaufman for Ridgewood Talks. Thanks again to Rob for coming by, Rob Wolcott. Check out his book, Proximity. Hopefully we'll get a book signing with him soon. As you can tell, Rob is full of great ideas, and he's a very compelling person to speak with. Thanks for joining the show, and we'll see you guys soon.